Is that everyone in from the waiting room there, Mike?
Yes.
You're on mute, Mike.
Yeah, everyone's in, Michelle, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody to the Meet the Candidates session. I'm Michelle Comer, and I'm just going to run through a couple of, I suppose, guidelines to how tonight's going to work. And then the candidates are going to introduce themselves rather than me introducing them. They're going to explain why they're running for election. And then we're going to take questions through Slido. So the way the questions are going to work tonight is probably best explained by Mike O'Connor. So Mike, if you want to unmute yourself, just can everyone mute yourself just while we're speaking, and then you can unmute yourself if there's something that you want to do. The best way to get our attention is probably use the chat feature on Zoom and just put it into everybody if there's a problem or if you need to get our attention or something like that. Mike?
Yeah, I'm just going to put a link in the chat there in case people haven't seen it. So that's the link to Slido. So Slido is just a format for asking questions. You can either put your name to it or anonymously. And the thing is, so what you can do with a Slido is you can see all the questions that have been posed to be asked. And then it's kind of like social media. You can, if you see a question that's similar to your question, you might say, oh yeah, that's similar to mine, and then like it. So what will happen is it will be a short period of time with so many candidates in 2 minutes per question. So we mightn't get through all questions. So the thing with Slido is the more popular questions are the ones that resonate with people will kind of rise to the top and hopefully will get answered. So that's the way it is. But as I said, the link should be there so everyone should be able to see it and ask the questions. And then as they get asked, I can pop them off the list then.
Can everybody hear and see okay? If not, throw a question into the group chat there. Okay, I think the best thing to do is to just mention that one of the candidates who you might have heard was going for the role of member of the board has withdrawn his candidacy, and that's Rory Nevin, so he's no longer standing for election. Finbar Gethins is standing for election as a member of the board, but unfortunately I think the notice was a little bit too short and I haven't actually heard back from him. And I have apologies from the two current members of the board, Mary Hogg and Peter Garrad, who are actually on a board meeting tonight. It clashed with it, so therefore they couldn't actually make it tonight, so they sent on their apologies. So I think I'm going to start with Richie Forde. Richie, if you want to unmute yourself maybe and just tell us all, introduce yourself and tell us where you're standing for election. And we'll give you 2 minutes. Mike, can you just put 2 minutes up on the clock there, please?
Say when, Mike.
Anytime.
I'll start now. I'll get ahead of the clock. Hi everyone. Thanks to Michelle and the team for putting this evening on. My name is Richie Forde. I scout locally with Carrigaline 55th Cork, where I'm a venture scouter. I've had a couple of roles throughout my group, section leader for Cubs, section leader for Scouts, took a short break, and now I'm back as a venture scouter. Nationally, I've done a bit on the Scout program team. So in the old structure, I was on the program team for 6 years, mainly involved in national activities. And currently I'm the team lead for Crean Challenge. So that's a bit about my scouting background, I suppose. In my day-to-day job, my career, I work for Bank of Ireland in Cork City as a financial advisor. I suppose, why am I running for the board? When I saw the 3 vacancies become available, I suppose I thought that I could bring something, both from my scouting background and from my career background, to be a constructive member of the board. And I suppose one of the main reasons was I felt that things weren't moving in the direction that that I or my group would have maybe perhaps liked to see things going. And so that was a big reason for me putting my name forward.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Richard. So we have Martin Burbridge. Martin, do you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself? Mike, maybe you might give us 2 minutes on the clock. It's worth mentioning, actually, Martin, before you start, that this is being recorded by Mike. Okay, so Martin, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. Martin Burbridge, been involved in Scouts for almost 52 years. Have been Chief Scout, first Chief Scout of Scouting Ireland, where I served for 5 years, headed up the board and the NMC during that time. And otherwise, I've been involved in all sorts of things in Scouting, from Scout leader, Cub leader, Beaver Scout leader, Venture Scout leader, group leader, etc. over the years. I'm a leader trainer and was involved in developing wood badge training back in the early 90s. And in more recent years, I've been involved with the Governance Review Group and was chairperson of that group when we brought proposals to National Council back in October 2018. As regards work, I was a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. I have a diploma in corporate strategy. I dealt with the Wharton Business School on an executive development program. So I have a lot of experience in that area. And work-wise, my last posting in IDA Ireland, where I worked for nearly 40 years, was secretary to the board, head of corporate services, head of finance, chief risk officer, etc. So I have a lot of experience in all of those areas. Why do I want to come back in? I don't really, in one way, but duty calls. I was involved with putting forward the governance proposals. And my belief is that they need to be fully implemented as put forward to National Council. And my aim is to assist the board to try and do that. And hopefully it'll be successful. I think there are a few things that need to be addressed, such as support hubs for scout groups. I think also there are a few other things that we need to address. And I'd be hoping that my contribution to the board would be useful in helping do that.
Thank you very much, Martin. On the ball there, Mike, thanks. So next we're going to move on to the 2 candidates for the Chief Scout position. We have Damien and Jill. Do either one of you particularly want to go first? Okay, well then,
I don't
Jill,
really mind.
Can I take you first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so thanks for inviting me along. My name is Jill Farrell and I'm a rover scouter in Fifth Fort Tollymount in Dublin. I've been involved in scouting for over 10 years and it's contributed hugely to my personal growth. As well as being involved at a group level, I've been on county and national teams and represented Scouting Ireland internationally. If elected as Chief Scout, I believe I can be a relatable and approachable person for all our young people, but I also understand the problems associated with being a scouter and volunteer. I don't know everyone's experience, but I intend to listen to as many people as possible to ensure that as Chief Scout, I will be representing this and supporting the Scouts and Scouters on the ground. I'd hope that this would support me in achieving one of my main aims of valuing and inspiring adult volunteers. The role of Chief Scout and the structure of Scouting Ireland has changed since the last election. And it's now primarily about representing Scouts, Scouters and Scouting Ireland. I aim to utilise this fresh start, and I think due to this change, I believe it's a really good opportunity for a young person to take the lead and to showcase what Scouting is all about by bringing a new and youthful perspective to the office. I think having a young person as Chief Scout would also demonstrate the importance of youth empowerment, highlight the youth leadership opportunities within Scouting and inspire others to take up these opportunities. I think the Chief Scout should work closely with the board, the CEO and the provincial commissioners to ensure support to groups are both adequate and dynamic. Although we have moved to a corporate structure, I think that this structure should be volunteer-led and staff-supported. My final two aims, which I'd like to promote within and outside Scouting Ireland, are prioritising our responsibility to the planet and promoting the adventure. I credit the value I have for nature and my sense of adventure. I'm an environmental scientist now. So from my experiences in scouting, I'm not sure we always kind of showcase these enough. And I think I'd like everyone in the country to see and realise how amazing scouting really is. I think Scouting Ireland is a grassroots movement, and I believe the local scout group is the essence of it. I want to ensure that Scouting Ireland moves forward sustainably, where young people are at the core of what we do and they're empowered to reach their full potential. I'd like adult volunteers to feel supported and understood and ensure that no one loses their sense of adventure. So in order to achieve these aims and bring a new face and fresh ideas to Scouting Ireland, I'm running for Chief Scout. Yeah. Thanks.
That was a lot to get into 2 minutes.
Sorry.
Well done, Jill.
And just a tad over 10 seconds, but I allowed
sorry.
I allowed it because Mark went slightly over as well, but I allowed it. It's okay.
You're so generous, Mike.
Nice.
Okay, Damien.
Okay, good evening all.
The clock there, Mike.
All right, we're ready to start, Mike. Good evening all. Damien Scanlon is my name, and I do thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. Over the next couple of weeks, your group is going to be asked to select our next Chief Scout, and I'm asking you for your number one. I'm putting myself forward because I believe I bring a wide range of unique skills to the role of Chief Scout, gained over both my youth and adult membership in Scouting and through my life and career experiences. The role of the Chief Scout and duties of the Chief Scout are clearly set out in the Constitution. To represent the company at ceremonial and other public events when requested to do so, whether generally or specifically by the directors, to chair meetings of the members of the company and to chair the motions committee. I am committing to fully fulfilling those roles. But in addition, my aim and goal, if elected to the position of Chief Scout, is to be the Chief Scout that will be an inspiration to our youth members, both by meeting with them and by being at the youth assembly. A Chief Scout that will be a source of influence and encouragement to our adults, and one that will include and listen to all. I believe that by meeting with and listening to our members and sharing their experiences, that I can best serve you in the role as Chief Scout and be your voice to reflect your vision and wishes and place high value and recognition on the contribution that we all make. In offering you as the next Chief Scout, I bring with me a wealth of experience gained both in Scouting and through my work-life experience, especially in An Garda Síochána. I am now an active programme scouter with the 18th Kildare Prosperous. I work with all sections because we're very low on leaders. I'm CPC for Kildare Scout County, and I'm a member of the Explorer Belt team for this year. I've like Martin, I've been around for a while. I've over 45 years and have served in many roles, including Chief Commissioner, National Commissioner for Scouts, and at all levels, both at county and group level. I was a member of the National Executive Board, and even for a short time, I was an employee of Scouting Ireland. We are all facing many challenges both at this time, both with the pandemic and the disillusionment that many are feeling. The enthusiasm and healing must be driven by the Chief Scout alongside the board and its staff. I have a can-do approach and a positive attitude to all things. I believe in that. And I firmly believe that negativity is the enemy of progress. It is vital that the Chief Scout is central to assuring our members and the public that we are very credible and are a viable organisation that moves forward as one. I have the experience, the knowledge, the time, and the skill set to be your Chief Scout, and I'm asking you for your number one. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. I'm looking at Mike's face there, and I feel like you might have gone over, Damien.
Oh, so apologies.
I let everyone go over a little bit. Okay. It's all right.
No, it's important that everyone just settles, I think, at the very beginning. Okay, guys, so the questions are coming in on Slido at the moment. So I'm going to go and start with the board question because you guys spoke a minute ago. So Richie, you went first. So I'm going to direct the first question towards you. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing Scouting Ireland in the years ahead? And how would you as a member of the board address those challenges?
Where to start? Obviously, I think one that we've
2 minutes to
2 minutes.
it.
Oh God. Obviously, one of the big challenges I think we're facing as a company of Scouting Ireland, of course, is financially. And and this pandemic has kind of really shown that we probably have been slightly unsustainable in how our income comes in over the last few years. And I think that's going to be a huge priority for Scouting Ireland going forward, that we can't singly rely on our fees from our groups in order to sustain the company alongside the governmental funding. So I think on the board, certainly something that I would be looking to push early on would be income generation from different sources. Both the company should be able to support the groups. I don't feel it should be the other way around, that the groups are supporting the company. And for me, that's probably the biggest task that we need to get over. As well, obviously, I'm sure we're all aware of the legal cases that are coming down the road as well for the company Scouting Ireland. And while some of those have been addressed in the financial report for last year, we can't really estimate at what cost that's going to become. So I suppose in essence, I think financially the company is the biggest hurdle we have to get over, and so that the company can be in a position again to support the groups that need the support.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to ask the same question, and I'll repeat it just to make it easier, of Martin. So what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing Scouting Ireland in the years ahead, and how would you, as a member of the board, address these challenges?
Well, I would agree with what Richard had to say in terms of finance. Obviously is a big issue. A large part of our funding is from government. We need to try and get more of that. And we do need to address the imbalance of the membership fees having increased significantly in recent years. So that's certainly one challenge. And as Richard said, fundraising and other sources of funding is important. But whilst we have to do that, we need to be careful that we don't do things that go completely against the ethos of Scouting. So for example, if we're looking for sponsorship from companies, we need to check thoroughly that their fit and the way that they operate fits with what we believe as Scouts, and that we do the right thing and don't support companies that are contrary to our ethos inadvertently. But probably even more importantly for me, I think, is given what has happened in the last year or so, and with the pandemic, the impact of that, we need to get our support hubs at provincial and county level in play in order that Scout groups get the support they need. And through that, we can then see how best to support the Scout groups. So that links back in with the fact that we need to improve communications considerably in order that we understand, and it needs to be two-way, in order that we understand what are the issues out on the ground with groups, and therefore get the message across of what the board is trying to do, and establish whether or not there's proper synergy and also accountability. And there's lots more, I know, but they'd probably be some of the key things initially.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on to a question for our two Chief Scout candidates. I asked Jill to go first last time, so Damien, I'm going to ask you to go first this time and ask you what you think is the most important aspect of the role of Chief Scout currently.
I believe that the role of the Chief Scout is to reflect the members of the organisation. It is important going forward that the Chief Scout will listen to its members and respect and reflect their views. In considering putting myself forward for the role, I looked at what I felt was the criteria for a good Chief Scout, and I asked people, what do you want from the Chief Scout? The resounding response was, I want a Chief Scout that will turn up next week if I'm having an investiture and will acknowledge and thank the people. And I think that's important. I think there has been a change, and we've commented on it already, that there has been a change in the role of the Chief Scout from what we would traditionally know. And it is now very much a ceremonial role, other than the few committees and the annual general meeting that they chairs. But it is ceremonial role. So I believe it is important that the Chief Scout is out there, meeting with the membership, more importantly, listening to the membership, and then reflecting that back to both the board and to the staff through the direct liaison with the CEO.
Thank you, Damien, for that. I'm going to ask Jill the same question, and just to make it easy, Jill, I'm going to just repeat the question for you. What do you think is the most important aspect of the role of Chief Scout?
I think I agree with Damien a lot. I think there's kind of roles that are outlined in the Constitution, but I think in order to achieve those roles, the Chief Scout has to be a direct line of communication nearly. Like the Chief Scout has to be out there, seen at events. They have to be visiting people, in joining in with their kind of adventures and their scouting journeys, and then supporting them. And it's not that the Chief Scout necessarily will have all the answers, but I think the Chief Scout should be someone who can point them in the right direction, that knows, oh, this is your query, this is who you need to contact about it. Like, I'm not going to say that I'm going to learn everything inside and out, but I want to be someone who can find someone to give you the answer to your questions and find you the support you need. And I think it's about communicating directly with the board, communicating directly with the CEO and the departments, and communicating with the provincial commissioners and the county commissioners and those teams that are there, and making sure that those teams link in and do give the supports that the group need. I think there's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of kind of lack of understanding at the moment as to what's going on at a national level. And I think the Chief Scout should be someone who can kind of bring clarity to that and ensure that that support at the national level is what groups are looking for and what groups need, both the Scouters and the youth members.
Thank you very much for that, Jill. Okay, I'm going to move on to the board members because we'll try and take them alternating. So where we have a Chief Scout question and a board question. We had a quick question in there about where we're taking the questions from. So we had originally taken questions from the Google Forms that were previously submitted. We logged all of those questions into Slido, and you just vote in the Slido and the question moves up. The more people that vote for it, the more likely it is, because I'm looking at it here, that I'm going to answer that question. But you can also put in some new questions, so it's a mix of both old and new. So this is a board question, and I think I started with Richie the last time. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wasn't able to put all the questions in from the spreadsheet because Slido has a limit on the characters, so I didn't get them all in. I'll go back and have a look and see.
Okay. So we can maybe take a look at that.
So if people try to rephrase them maybe, or try and ask them a bit more.
Yeah. And also have a look at the ones that are there. It might be quite similar to what it is you want to ask. Okay, so I asked Richie the question last time first. So Martin, I'm going to ask first this time, if that's okay. And the question is about communications between the board and the members. So in the past, sometimes this has been a sticking point as we transition from one system to another. Obviously, it's not always smooth, but how, as a member of the board, do you think the communications could be improved with the members?
Well, for start off, I think there should be, whether it be monthly or every 2 months, there should be a bulletin that very clearly sets out what are the things that the board should be working on, and the things that have to be achieved, and progress against that. And we need to be more open than we have been in recent times on that. An example of that would have been the bulletins that we put out on when we were doing the governance review, where there were 17 bulletins over a period of just under 2 years. So I think that's one way. I think also meetings like this with provinces and committees of the board or subcommittees of the board should be able to meet with provinces on a fairly not frequent basis, but a few times a year or so, and to listen to and see what are the issues, such as we're doing now this evening, an opportunity to ask questions. So I think that's another option. And then also I think some other stuff in terms of what's happening on the website and so on. I mean, I go in and I'm looking up who are the list of board members, and it's out of date weeks after the last elections. So I think there are simple things that can be done that can help improve the communications. But most of all, we should be listening to what our Scout groups and provinces and Scout counties are saying and trying to do something about that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the same question of Richie Forde. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, just repeat it, Michelle, just so I make sure I get it.
Communication between the board and the members. In the past, I suppose, as we transition from one particular system to another system, obviously there's some issues around communication. As a member of the board, how would you improve the communication between the board and its members?
Yeah, so I think I have to agree a lot with what Martin was saying earlier. I think just a point to touch on as well. I remember going to my first AGM almost 10 years ago now, and this was the same question was brought up at the first AGM I was at, in why aren't we getting proper communication from what was the NMC then? It seems like for something that the obvious answer is there, we're still seem to be, it's a hurdle. Like Martin was saying, the membership, the company of Scouting Ireland should be receiving regular updates on the work that the board are doing, the work that is outlined in front of them, and like Martin was saying, how the progress is coming with them. And I think the easiest way of doing that is pushing out emails or bulletins to the groups. Again, we have a communications department as well, and they should be utilised in facilitating all of this. Again, it needs to be two-way. So it's great that the board can push out bulletins of updates, but they need to be receiving communication from the groups. I think a lot of that can be managed through the counties and the provincial level as well. I think we have the structure already in place there. It's just utilising it. So I suppose it seems like a simple fix, but there's questions why it hasn't been implemented over the last good few years. It's something that I believe strongly in, as well as good communication. There needs to be transparent reasons around decisions made, I feel. And whether the groups will agree with decisions made by the board or not, as long as the board are being transparent with those decisions and communicating them correctly, I feel it'll be better received anyway than no communication at all.
Thank you. I can see Mike making a cut them off there motion. He's brutal like that, so he is heartless completely. Thank you very much for that, Richie. I'm going to swing back around to the Chief Scout candidates. We're getting in a couple of questions for all candidates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, I think, with Jill this time. And this question comes in from one of our Galway groups. Scouting Ireland has gone through a lot of upheaval in the recent past and the distant past. Based on your learning, both personally and within as a scout, your involvement in scouting, what learning have you gotten out of what's happened? So what lessons should we be taking from what happened in scouting in the past? That's a tough one now, Jill, to be starting with you.
It is a tough one. I think it's a tough question, but I think there is definitely lessons we can learn from it. I think the lessons are quite personal to each individual, but I do think there's a lot that we need to learn in terms of kind of transparency and trust. I think there's things in Scouting Ireland I think there's been a lot of issues in the past or few years over things, a lack of transparency, and it's not that we need to know exactly what's going on, but everyone needs to understand the process of what's happening. And I think that made dealing with the kind of recent situations more difficult because people didn't understand what was going on and there was kind of a drip feeding of information. I think the members really need to get the information before kind of things are out in the public. And I think that's definitely a lesson that should be learned from it. Yeah, and I think also there was a lot of focus, a lot of attention drawn to the things that have happened in the past, and I think it is important to think about them, to learn from them, but I also think it is important at some point that we do have to move past it and we have to try and focus on the future. And I think that's the only way we're going to move forward as an organization, is to step beyond those things and not to ignore them and not pretend like they didn't happen, but to learn from them and then focus on what we kind of all agree on and the things that really make us a Scout movement. And that is kind of our youth members, our youth empowerment, and providing kind of activities, education and learning experiences for them. Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. That was a really comprehensive answer. Damien, if I could ask you the same question, do you want me to just to repeat it?
No, it's grand. I'm thinking it online. Thanks for that. I'm a program scouter, and as I echo kind of Jill's sentiments, the learning that I've got out of it is very personal. I've gone through it all. I served in the position, as I say, with Chief Commissioner of CBSI, and I dealt personally with a lot of the hurt that was going on at the time. So my experiences are probably a bit more so that I dealt with it directly. There were issues. I was mentioned on the likes of the Joe Duffy show. I challenged them, and I took on the biggest. I took on the biggest radio show in Ireland, and I won. So it's very personal, the experiences that I've got out of it. And to we have to face it. It was what happened, and we have to be transparent moving forward. And that's all. That's it.
Okay, Damien, thank you very much for that. I'm going to move to Martin Burbridge next. Martin, do you need me to repeat the question? It's basically about lessons that you have gotten either personally or through scouting from what's happened in scouting in both the distant past and recent. What lessons should we be pulling from it?
Well, one of the key lessons is that, for me, is that we really do have to question, are we receiving all of the information that's appropriate for whatever job and role we're in? And in particular, for example, in the board, because some of the things that have been mentioned that happened in the distant past, those of us who are operating at, for want of a better word, a senior level or a national level in CSI at the time I was, I knew nothing about any of it. And that's disturbing, that you can have people who are operating as the board and directors of an organization, and there are things that have happened and we haven't been informed or know about it. So we've got to learn those particular lessons. I suppose I've learned other lessons too. More recently, if 2018 is recent in recent terms, is how you can end up doing what you believe in and then you get sideswiped. And I feel that we did in terms of the governance proposals, because not all of what was envisaged in that has been implemented. Now, a lot has, and a fair bit of work has happened, but I think there's more needs to be done. So I suppose the key for me is that no matter how long we're involved in something, you can still be terribly naive, and you've just got to be very careful to learn from what has happened and try and avoid it happening again in the future.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much for that. And last but not least, Richie, do you need me to repeat the question, or?
No, I've read it. Thanks, Michelle. I suppose the question around the personal aspect of it, as a young scouter, I suppose it was extremely disheartening to see Scouting Ireland portrayed the way it was in the news. But I think what caught me most was that I learned it from the news first, as opposed to from within scouting. I feel like that's something that they should have got ahead of. They should have communicated with the membership, and continued to communicate with the membership as this process went on. Personally, I found it was a struggle to read about it in the papers and hear through back channels and see it on the news. So it kind of ties back to communication. I suppose the learning from it is that we need to use the correct channels in how we communicate, and stop any of these kind of I suppose, back channels of communication getting out and getting distorted before it gets to the membership.
Okay, Richie. Sorry, Richie, were you finished?
Yeah, sorry, thanks.
Okay, Richie, just because you were the last person to answer, I'm going to direct this question to you first. And
Just
all
take
of
a quick
you,
sip of water.
all of you mentioned this in your answer that you know, Scouting Ireland has maybe gone through a really, really tough time, and you've all talked about sort of looking forward and you know, healing in some way. So I'm going to ask you, what specifically would you do as a member of the board to bring the membership together and get us moving forward?
It's a tough question in some aspects. I think we have to remember why we're all in the game of scouting. And it's all about our youth members and youth empowerment and youth involvement and creating better citizens for both Ireland and globally. Like, that's what the Scout movement is about. So I suppose we kind of need to go back to basics in some aspects. We need to be supporting our groups. This is where the scouting happens. This is where our youth members develop. And I suppose as a board member, I would bring that to the board and feel very strongly about it, that decisions being made are being made with the group and the youth member involved. And that's just something I feel extremely passionately about. And it's the way forward. It's why we're all here. It's why we're all here this evening talking about it. So that's what I would do.
Okay, Richie, thank you very much for that. I'm going to bring Martin Burbridge in next. So Martin, you mentioned in your answer that you know, a lot of changes happened, some of it good, some of it bad, but the membership, what would you do to bring the membership together and get us moving forward in a more positive way? What actions would you take as a member of the board?
I think the first thing would be to try and get the provincial and county support hubs working in conjunction with the scout groups, but also more in tune with what's going on at board level. I suspect that there's a gap there that we had not envisaged should be there. They should be an integral part of what's going on and how support is delivered to scout groups. The other key thing for me is the youth assembly. Now, I know there's been talk of it being somewhat different, and if the youth reps and so on want it to be different, that's fine. But I think it's really important that it happens and that the Chief Scout is directly involved in working with the youth reps and the youth assembly as soon as possible. And then we need to bring it all together. So we need to get those conferences that we had envisaged as the GRG at provincial and national level for scouts and scouters to happen, and to happen as soon as we possibly can, so that people can talk and meet and mix and find ways of doing things in a collegiate way. And I suppose that's enough for now, but you get an idea of where I'm coming from on it.
I do, Martin, actually. Thank you very much for that. It was a good answer. Damien, so as Chief Scout, again, same question, except you're answering it, I guess, from a Chief Scout perspective. So what would you do as Chief Scout to bring the membership together and get us moving forward in a positive way? What actions would you take as Chief Scout?
There are many challenges that we're facing, particularly the one with COVID. Many groups, as you were saying earlier, even in your own part of the country, are closed down, as they are mine. And it is important that the supports are put in place, such as Martin refers to, the provincial support and the county support. And the purpose of it is to enable us to open with as least stress as possible. And I see there's a question there about mental health. And that's, you know, the stresses that people put on, you know, a lot of the decisions were made over the last couple of weeks by groups in relation to closing down, paying fees, groups in my own county closed down for 9 months. That put a lot of stress, mental stress on our scouters and our young people. We need to ease the processes to opening up going forward and have the board, the Chief Scout and the staff working together You know, the first thing I would like to do is sit down with both the CEO and the new chair of the board going forward, and see how best we can serve the membership. And that's what it's all about. It is about listening to and reflecting and easing the process to getting us back out of all the troubles that have happened, including COVID, which has hit us badly for the last 12 months.
Thank you, Damien, for that answer. And I'm going to ask the same question of Jill. So Jill, it's the same question, but in relation to your role as Chief Scout. So if you were elected Chief Scout, what would you do to bring the membership together? What actions would you take to get us moving positively forward?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of been mentioned already, but I think I'd like to work with the board, work with the provincial commissioners and the county commissioners, and make sure that that structure is working well, and that I can support that structure and help them out, but also to make sure that they're directly supporting the groups. And then from my perspective as well, I'd love to be kind of an inspiration to show, like, I mean, I've come up through Scouts, and most of my skills, my soft skills, my leadership skills, communication skills, they've all come from Scouting. I'd love to showcase that to the membership, to kind of show this is what Scouting is about. This is what I've gotten from it. This is what some of my friends have gotten from it. This is the journeys it's taken me on. And I think if we try and highlight that, it will help to motivate people to keep going, because it is hard now with COVID to keep wanting to Scout at times. I know that personally, and I know from a lot of other people, with everything else that's going on, it can be hard to keep moving forward and to keep focusing on the youth. But I'd also like to make a better network for Scouters. I think there's people out there who are running fantastic programs online. They're running fantastic things in person, and they've developed it. So why can't we just move it to another group and make it easy to roll out? And I think if we can try and have better kind of online meetings, even, like, I know this is kind of thinking more in the short term, but or a better resource pool for people to take them, I think that would be absolutely brilliant to see that. And then I also think that even post-COVID, I'd like to see the online mechanisms continue to be utilised, because some Scouters aren't always able to kind of travel around the country for having Scout conferences or get to things. But I'd like to see that the board and the Chief Scout or the Chief Scout and the provincial commissioners have kind of regular kind of online meetings to take people's queries and to offer them supports and build the connections within the Scouters at those meetings.
Thank you, Jill, very much for that. The next question I'm going to direct at Martin as a candidate for the board of directors. And Martin, I'm actually going to take two questions into one if you're looking at the Slido. So the first part of the question is really where you see the role of the county and provincial commissioners going forward in the structure of Scouting Ireland. And the second part of that question is the communication with county and provincial teams. Where does it lie on your list of priorities, and how would you implement improvements to this communication? So there's two parts to that question. Do you need me to repeat either?
Sorry, just the first bit again, please.
Sure. Where do you see the role of the provincial and county commissioners in the structure of Scouting Ireland going forward?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a very important role, because what we looked at in restructuring was to try and have a support hub which can provide all the skills that are needed and all the supports that are needed for Scout groups. So if a Scout group has a problem, they should be able to approach a county or provincial team, and they will have access to whoever it is has the answer to provide the skills, to provide the help, to provide the know-how that a Scout group might need. So that's important then, that the provincial and county teams are an integral part of what's going on at the national office with the staff and the teams on the operational side. They must be much more involved than I believe they have been to date. And that's something that I would be trying to push and make sure that it happens. And then, of course, you come back to the old favorite of communications. So we really do need to try and improve all of that. I mean, look, you know, we've got these sorts of meetings going on Zoom and whatever. Why can't we continue to do that going forward? And let's do it on a more regular basis. Cut down the amount of time. I'm not saying we shouldn't travel at all and meet, because that's vital. But at the same time, there's a lot that can be done without having to drag people all over the country.
So Martin, just to clarify, the thing you would do to improve communications with the provinces and the counties is to hold more regular Zoom meetings with the county and provincial commissioners as a member of the board. Is that close to what you're saying there?
Well, of course, unfortunately, as an individual board member, you don't have the authority to do it. But if I have my way, it's something that whichever committee or subcommittee of the board is responsible will do that.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to direct the same question to Richie Forde as a candidate for a member of the board of directors. Richie, do you need me to repeat the question?
Just the first part there again, Michelle, please.
Sure, no problem. So the first part is, where do you see the roles of the county and provincial commissioners in Scouting Ireland going forward?
I believe they're an integral part of the whole structure of Scouting Ireland, and they should absolutely be utilised. The counties are there to support the groups, and the province, of course, to support the counties. I think one thing we should consider as well and remember is that our county commissioners and our provincial commissioners are also volunteers. So I know it's a big task, and I know the people going in for those roles will probably be aware of it, but we also have to tie in with our professional staff, with our provincial support officers, and we need to utilise that side of it as well. If the provincial commissioner or county commissioners don't always have the answer, they should have that support available to them. There was a second part to that question,
yeah, the
Michelle.
second part of that question, yeah. Richie, so the second part of the question is in terms of communication with county and provincial teams. So I suppose, is this a priority for you really, and how would you implement improvements to this communication?
Absolutely, like anything, communication needs to be there in order for any of this to work. Touching, I suppose, on the role of the Chief Scout as well, I believe that's a big part of where that role is going to come in for the Chief Scouts, in terms of the provincial commissioners should be kind of a support hub for the Chief Scout, and the Chief Scout is the direct link into the board that way. And so we need to utilise that as well in terms of communication, that the Chief Scout is up to date with information coming out of the board, can push that down to the provincial commissioners and down to our counties and groups. So that's kind of where I see that side of it working.
So more of a volunteer network and an information tree, developing an information tree.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for that, Richie.
Thanks.
So I'm going to direct just one part of this question to our two Chief Scout candidates. Damien, I might start with you, and that is where do you see the role of the provincial and the county commissioners going forward?
I just want to echo both Richie's and Martin's view that the Chief Scout shouldn't become isolated. It might be the most senior position, volunteer position in the association, but it shouldn't become isolated. And the network his network should certainly include the provincial commissioners and the youth reps. They are his source of information,
or hers,
as it said. Sorry.
Or hers.
Or sorry, yes, or hers, exactly. It is, that's the network that's there, and it's enabling, because it enables the Chief Scout, he or she, to bring the views and reflect the views directly to the CEO and the board.
Brilliant,
Okay.
Damien. Thank you very much for that. And Jill, finally, I'm coming to you, and I'm asking you, where do you see the role of the provincial and county commissioners going forward?
Well, I think it's kind of been said by everybody, but I would also agree that they are essential to supporting the groups and to, just running Scouting Ireland. I think it was interesting because I asked someone kind of where they sit at the moment, and someone outlined to me that they report to the Volunteer Resource Management and Group Support Department. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't like the fact that someone said they report to. I think that really the department should be supporting them. I think there should be a strong line of communication between the provincial commissioners and the county commissioners and the departments, because we have paid staff to help do the kind of the doggy work and help support and run the organization. But I don't think our volunteers should be kind of reporting to a department. I think, yes, they should be reporting to the board and they should be supported by the board, but also that as the Chief Scout, I'd like to be a strong line of communication with the provincial commissioners, but I think there should also be a direct link from the board to the provincial commissioners. It shouldn't be that it all has to kind of go through the Chief Scout. Yeah, I think that's kind of my view.
Jill, I'm going to ask you the next question, because it's a question for the Chief Scout and the Board of Directors candidates. So I'm just going to start with you. And it is, I don't know if you're looking at the slide there, but it's, how would you support the mental health of members coming out of lockdown? And how high a priority is mental health for you as a candidate for Chief Scout?
Mental health would be a huge priority for me. I think like from lockdown and even like before lockdown, I've had a lot of kind of personal experience with it. And I think one of the big things, like when we move out of lockdown, I think there will be like mental health episodes as such. And I think it's really important that, like, as scouts, we receive an awful lot of first aid training, but this is all based on kind of physical first aid. And I think there should be an emphasis on trying to do mental health first aid with both scouters and the youth members, so that we are equipped, you know, going out of it to be able to support our youth members. But also, I think by doing this training, you learn how to, like, by doing mental health training, and there is a lot of kind of options for that sort of things out there. I'm not gonna, but I think by doing it, you also learn how to support yourself. And I think it also should be outlined, like there is supports there for mental health, but I think Scouting Ireland don't emphasize it or show that off enough. I think it should be included kind of in most bulletins and most of the weekly notices, that there is a little, you know, if you need help, this is kind of where to go, or here's kind of some top tips for mental health coming out of this. And then if I was elected as the Chief Scout, I'd like to kind of highlight that and use my platform to give other options and to support people.
So you champion mental health issues for both youth members and scouters if you were elected candidate as Chief Scout?
Yes, I would, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go to Richie Forde next, because this question was for both Chief Scouts and for candidates for election for the Board of Directors. So Richie, the question is, how would you support mental health of members coming out of lockdown? And how high a priority is mental health as an issue for you as a candidate for a member of the Board of Directors?
Yeah, it's an absolute priority. We're seeing it every day, whether it's within our families or our friends. It is affecting people. The pandemic is affecting people in different ways. I suppose I agree a lot with what Jill was saying there in terms of we need to provide training to our scouters, so that they can identify it within our youth members, and then also help in that regard. I would also like to see the youth reps, both nationally and provincial and county reps, all involved in this. There should be a campaign around it, and we should absolutely be championing it as Scouting Ireland, the largest youth organisation in Ireland. I think we need a lot more than just bulletin points. We're going to be coming out of this pandemic, fingers crossed, very soon, and returning to normal scouting, and people are going to have experienced the last year very differently. So I suppose to wrap it up, we need to provide training to our scouters and our youth reps. We need to bring around more communication and knowledge around the mental health area, and we need to implement it then within our groups.
Thank you for that, Richie. Damien, I'm going to come to you next. So as a candidate for Chief Scout, how would you support, and I know you were mentioning this earlier on, Damien, so it's probably a follow on from your question earlier, but I'll repeat the question just in case. How would you support the mental health of members coming out of lockdown as Chief Scout, and how high a priority is mental health for you as a candidate for Chief Scout?
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, and yes, I did refer to it earlier on because I think it's vitally important. I'd be very well aware of mental health and the stresses that people have suffered, particularly during the pandemic. We have gone through a year of nightmare that we would never have expected before. Big decisions had to be made, and people are up, just in my own family, I would be aware of the stresses that a further 6 weeks lockdown, and just the mental anguish and stress that brings on to a person. It is important going forward that as soon as we're in a position to move forward and that we have in place plans to support our Scouters and our youth members to getting back to providing program. That's what our goal is. We are about providing program. As I said to you, I think it is important to acknowledge that yes, we have all suffered some degrees of mental anguish and mental health. To me, it's a huge priority that we have in place the supports to reopen it where we need to, and that needs to be driven by the staff and the board, and through assisting both the provincial and county teams to supply the support that groups need going forward.
Okay, so recognizing it and then putting some systems in place at local level. Okay, Damien,
yes, I think that's it. Yeah.
Damien, thank you very much for that answer. Martin, I'm coming to you last with this question, but obviously we're asking it as a candidate for the board of directors. So how would you support the mental health of members coming out of lockdown, and how high a priority is mental health for you as a candidate as the board of directors?
I think, firstly, it is a high priority for me, particularly as Damien mentioned, and Jill and Richard. All of us have experienced it, and know people who have experienced severe problems, both mentally and also as a result physically over the last period during the pandemic. I don't think I've heard as much about what might be done from the point of view of anything that has come out from Scouting Ireland. Perhaps there is stuff that I just don't see because I'm not circulated with everything that comes out. But I do think that we do need to address it. I mean, it's one of the key things that we've got in what we want to do and in our key objective, which is, amongst other things, helping people develop emotionally. So we've got to put some effort into that. We certainly have to, as a board of directors, recognize that there are issues, but it's not the board itself that necessarily does anything on this, other than make sure that things are identified and done and provide the skills. We've got to work through, I believe, our support hubs, our scout groups in particular. And I think both Richie and Jill and Damien as well, I think, mentioned about how do we train our scouters more. We can't be experts in dealing with mental health, but we can certainly be experts in dealing with the what we need to do in a scout program to help our members deal with all the emotional trauma that they've suffered. So I think that's where, for me, the key will be, how do we do that? Okay,
that's brilliant, Martin. Thank you for that. Okay, so my next question is for the Chief Scout candidates. Jill, I think I started with you last time, so I'm going to come to you second, if that's okay. And I'm going to give Damien an opportunity to answer this one first. So it's, what are your main aims or goals that you want to achieve in this role?
Hi, Michelle. I say in my introduction, I outlined that my main aim is to be a Chief Scout that will be an inspiration to our youth members by meeting with them, talking with them, listening to them, and being part of the youth assembly. In my own county, I'm the CPC. I haven't appointed any ACPCs. I have my youth reps whom I have as part of my team. I don't have a layer between. We are all one team, and we work together in supporting the delivery of program in the county. And I think that's important for engagement with the youth people, with our youth members. I also want to be a source of influence and encouragement to our adults. we need our adults now, particularly as over the last 12 months, our adults have discovered there is things happening outside the scouting. They have discovered lives. That their hour a week that they were devoting to scouting, they've now moved on and devoting it to something else. We need to encourage them to come back. We need to be ready that come September, we are up, ready and able to provide scouting. So, as I said, I asked a lot of people, what do you want from your Chief Scout? I want to fulfill, my aim and goal is fulfill the wishes of our membership. And that is one who is out and about, listening and reflecting their views.
Thank you very much for that answer, Damien. Jill, I'm going to come to you and ask you, what are your main aims and goals that you want to achieve in the role of the Chief Scout?
Yeah, so I mentioned some of these kind of earlier on when I was trying to squish as much into the 2 minutes as possible. But yeah, much the same as Damien, I want to be on the ground, listening to people, sharing in kind of their adventures and experiences, and using that to decide kind of what exactly my aims are going forward. Having said that, though, I do have some aims now going into the position, or if going forward for election. But they are, like, I really want to support and inspire the adult volunteers. I think people are disheartened because of COVID and disheartened with things that have gone on, and I really want to try and help them and make sure that Scouting Ireland is giving them the adequate supports. I'd really like to prioritise youth empowerment and youth leadership. I think if having a young person as Chief Scout would be hugely inspiring for this. I think it would highlight to people the opportunities that Scouting creates, the learning that Scouting gives young people, and I think would also inspire others to take on further leadership roles, whether it's in their groups, at their counties, whether it's outside Scouting, or whether it's at a national level. I'd like to see our responsibility to the planet prioritised. I'm an environmental scientist, and I think I got a huge love of nature from Scouting through the years, whether that was about discussing kind of sustainable development on Thursday nights on our Scout town, or whether it was just out and about having a look at mushrooms on the ground or having a listen to the birds. I think Scouting does that, but we often don't recognise it. We don't translate to how much of an impact that's having kind of on the outside world, and I'd love to see that promoted outside of Scouting. Also recently I've met so many people who've asked me, like, oh, Scouting sounds amazing, you got to do like go on all these adventures and stuff, and I really think there's a lot of people in the country who don't see that. Like, Scouting still isn't seen as like cool, and I think it would be great if we could promote how like adventurous and how many journeys you get to go on as a Scout, and how much you get out of it, how much lifelong learning there is from Scouting. And then my kind of final one of my 5 aims is to utilize the fresh start that we have. We're still kind of finding our feet in this new structure, and as the Chief Scout, I'd really like to bring a new perspective to this and make sure that this is volunteer led and staff supported going forward, and that we make the most of this corporate structure, because we are moving towards it. We did vote it in and decide on it, so I think it's important that we try and think positively and utilize it the best we can.
Very good, Jill. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so this question is for the 2 members who are running as candidates for the board of directors. What would you like to see change in how the company is managed in Scouting Ireland? And I think I'll start with Martin, if that's okay with you, Martin, for this one.
Yeah, no problem. Well, firstly, I think I mentioned earlier, we need to improve our communications, but communications has to be a two-way thing. So we need to listen carefully to what's needed, and we need to get the support hubs, the provinces and the counties working together cohesively. Probably more than anything, I would like to see us getting back to the collegiate approach. I mean, some called our previous national councils as being adversarial and so on, but in actual fact, they were very collegiate, because we had opportunities to meet and talk and discuss stuff, both at the meeting itself and the surroundings of it. So I think, we do need to get the provincial conferences and national conferences for Scouts and Scouters back in again. And they'd probably be the key things. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of others, but that's really the main one for me.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask the same question of Richard Forde. So what would you like to see change in how the company is managed in Scouting Ireland?
I'd like to start seeing it being managed, full stop, really. We need a board of proactive members. It feels too much that we're reacting to things that are happening around us. We can do that both by short-term planning and then our longer future strategic plan for Scouting Ireland. Again, going to sound like a broken record, I think, over the next couple of weeks doing these calls, but it's all down to good communication, good two-way communication. So I suppose, without getting too much into it, I just think we need strong characters on the board. We need people who are willing to engage in healthy debate, to question why things are being done a certain way instead of just accepting they've always been done that way. And we need to move forward. We need to really take this opportunity to get our plan, or long-term plan in place, and engage in a short-term plan for coming out of COVID.
Thank you for that answer, Richie. And a question for the Chief Scout candidates, and that is, where do you see the National Youth Representative sitting in the new structure? And we'll start with Jill for that one.
So I was at the recent the National Youth Assembly, because the National Youth Forum is coming up. I just keep mixing them up. And the National Youth Representatives, I thought it was interesting. There was a big debate between kind of what the Scouts and Ventures thought and what the Rovers thought. But in the end, they decided they wanted to sit under the CEO. And I think it is up to them in the end. Like, I mean, I'm a youth member myself, but I think it is up to the National Youth Representatives to kind of decide that. And I wouldn't like to kind of influence that. But wherever they decide to sit, I think the Chief Scout has to communicate with them. I'd plan on having meetings. If I was elected, I plan on having meetings with them very, very regularly. I'd plan on being at the National Youth Assembly, being at the National Youth Forum, and hearing all of their issues, whether or not it is that they decide they directly want to report to the Chief Scout or the CEO or wherever it is they decide to sit. But I do think ultimately that decision has to be left up to the youth representatives, because it's not really youth empowerment if we don't let them decide where they want it to be.
Thank you for that answer, Jill. And Damien, the same question for you. Where do you think the National Youth Reps sit in the new structure?
It's the very same comment. It was the role of the Chief Scout to chair the Youth Assembly, but they've made a decision now that they kind of have direct input into the CEO. So they sit as part of the CEO's department. But it is vitally important, and I've stressed it a number of times tonight. It is vitally important that the Chief Scout is in contact with the youth reps, as it is with the adult reps. So it's together we move forward. It is vital that we're not focusing on the youth reps only. The whole lot doesn't exist without both. So it is important that we listen to both the youth reps and the adult reps, and that's going forward. And if they have decided that their input is through the CEO, that's their decision. But it is vitally important that the Chief Scout remains in contact and is part of that process.
So both candidates saying they would support the National Youth Reps regardless of where they sit, which I think is very positive. Okay, so we're out of questions that came in on Slido. I know that I think that the number, Mike, is 23267, is it? So if anybody has any other questions, you can throw them up there. I don't think we were going to take questions from the floor. Is that right, Mike? So Mike is just putting into a group chat. That's the first time you recognize that, Mike. Fair play. So yeah, I think unless anybody has any other questions that you want to throw into Slido, I'd like to thank all the candidates for joining us tonight. You've given some amazing answers. I think you've given us all something to think about. I'm going to ask you to send forward your emails so we can post it up in case anybody has any further questions they might think of. We've recorded this session tonight, so we might post it up or email it out to our group leaders who weren't able to make it tonight. And on behalf of everyone in the Western Province, I wish you all the absolute best of luck in your election.
Thank you
Anybody
very
got
much
any
for the
other questions
opportunity.
for us before we go? No bothers. I know that this is the first of many sessions for you guys. So the Western Province is the smallest province. So I hope it's a good warm up for the bigger ones that are going to come in the next couple of weeks. And I wish you the best of luck with those guys. And on that note, I'm going to ask everybody to, or Mike, just to end the session because he's our technical guy. And thanks to Mike and Lorraine, the PYPR and the PTC, and everybody else who joined us tonight. And thanks particularly for all the questions. They were absolutely brilliant. Best of luck, guys, and bye-bye.
Thanks very much, Michelle.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye
Mel.
now,
Bye, guys.
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.